and welcome to another episode of the Hali Hewa podcast with your host Abigail Kima. This podcast seeks to amplify key voices from the African continent to speak on issues of climate justice, just transition, and everything that ensures the planet is safe and healthy for generations to come. And today I am joined by a good friend and a fellow climate justice advocate, Kaluki Mutuku, who I do not want to delve deep into his bio because it is quite a lot. But welcome, Kaluki.
Thanks, Abby, and I'm not sure my bio is that big. It's good to be hosted by you.
Yeah, I mean, you've done a lot for African youth on this continent, and I know many can attest to it.
Thank you.
And I have the privilege of witnessing that and also being your friend.
Asante.
Have I hosted you on the podcast before?
It's the first, well, we've done something at SES.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
in person, so this is the very first official, so it's an honor
Yeah.
to be in your platform.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you. So please introduce yourself to our guest. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what makes you you.
Interesting question. So, hi everyone, I'm Kaluki Paul. I like to call myself a stubborn optimist and a proud son of the African soil. And rightfully so, because I so much believe in the realities of Africa, not just of the chaos, of the wars, of the tribulations, but the realities about the people power, the power of the young people, the potential to change our ecosystems and, feed our people, and just seeing a better Africa that is thriving and that can really invest more in its future. And so I believe my role is really just helping to, steward that network, bring up that generation that will be able to get the skills, the resources, and the opportunities to shape the Africa that we are shaping. So that is me, and I do have a few entities that I'm happy to talk about as we go by.
Mm-hmm. You can share them with us right now.
Yeah, so I am the father of Kin International, which is a non-profit, grassroots non-profit that brings together climate advocates from all over Africa, but especially a special focus of Kenya, of course, and the whole point being there's so much young people are doing, but at times that work is not met by the resources and the skills training. So we do exist to train young people and communities that are working on agriculture, climate justice works, but also training them on how to better use social media to really advocate for their causes and create programs and trainings that can support their peers, not just from Africa, but from other places in the world. Art Now Media is my youngest baby that I founded last year, and it's a digital studio that is working to create conversations around, Africa, conversations about authentic community voices around climate, nature, people, and development. And for me, it's important because, of course, on top of what Hali Hewa is doing, which is actually one of the initial people that inspired me to start Art Now Media, is there's more that is needed in the space. We need to have more of these, communities, podcasts, platforms to be able to diversify the voices, platform the people that are doing the work on the ground, and just bring about that fresh perspective, bring the authentic community voices of the people doing the work in its rawest forms, but being able to also dignify the people. A lot of the stories that we've seen a lot before have not dignified the African people. So through Art Now Media, we want to really see how we can change the narrative and tell an authentic story about them, but from their own point of views and in a way that respects them as human beings first, without exposing them to their vulnerabilities and, the challenges that they go about in their daily lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
First of all, I have to say I'm honored to hear that Hali Hewa podcast is what inspired you to start Art Now Media. And I think you touch on very important issues that are also close to my heart when it comes to narrative. And I say narrative is everything because we see how stories are told of the African continent, and everyone takes it as gospel truth, because for a long time we are never the people controlling how our stories are told. And for me, even with the Hali Hewa podcast, I really had struggled to go to these very big climate conferences and then not see the most important voices represented, and not just represented physically, but also the story about us, and I think I like what has happened for the last couple of years, maybe 3 years, where we are no longer painting Africa as a victim. We want to showcase the solutions that we have, the innovations that we have, our greatest resource, which is African youth. The skills that we have, the innovation, the ideas, the creativity that we bring to the conversation. And I think we are lucky to live in a very digital era where we have the tools that we need to literally tell the stories that we want. So it's such an important conversation for me that we need to continuously have. Anyways, moving to what you do. And when someone asks me about Kaluki, the first thing that comes to mind is nature, biodiversity, restoration, conservation. And I know you are part of, you are very center when it came to the birth of Inuka project. And I know Kaluki is synonymous to Inuka, and there are very many success stories about restoration of wetlands, restoration of landscapes across Kenya. So I want you to tell us a bit more about that.
Thanks, Abigail. Yes, Inuka Africa is a program that I'm always honored to talk about it. You will wake me up at 2 a.m., 4 a.m. I still talk about it in very strict execution. And for me, it's important because, one, Inuka is a Swahili word that means rising up. And so I have a way with words, and almost everything I create has a meaning. And for me, it was a moment from 2020 that I saw Africa's youth and communities needed to rise up to the occasion, but also rise up to the resourcing. A lot of the work is happening on the ground, but at times many of these champions are doing it from out of their pockets or without the resources, and still they manage to do a lot of the restoration works. So I put together this proposal in 2020, just around COVID times anyway, to see to it how we can, fundraise to resource young people, build their capacities through trainings, and allow them field exposure to what their peers were doing on the ground, and therefore making a case on what it means if we are to trust young people and communities with financing in the sense of microgrants to help them scale and expand their potential on what they're doing. So did the proposal. Of course, COVID hit very bad, and I remember back then our initial funder pulled out. Of course, in a justifiable manner, we understand a lot of the COVID, recovery funds came from what was to come to the climate movement. And I feel like if it was someone else, would have despaired. But I remember I spent that year, of course, trying to see how I can, take the moment to fine tune the projects, the concept notes, and trying to convince more donors to come on board. And it took me 2 years until I finally got the funder who eventually gave us the grant to be able to, bring this dream to life. And so we were able to work with several groups of youth. Initially it was 5, and then we ended up with 3 because of some internal checks and balances here. But ideally, Inuka funded youth from all places in Kenya, thinking of Mombasa, where there is a group working on mangrove restoration, worked with a team in Marsabit who are working on a project around farmer-managed natural regeneration, how we can take advantage of the natural ecosystems to regenerate and take care of the naturally growing trees to actually restore them and create forests while farming. And then there was a team in Ondiri who are, Ondiri is a very important wetland, and it's faced a lot of serious chaos, destruction, forest fires, people encroaching into it, greenhouses that are really contributing to its dwindling. So we funded them to really see how they can, create awareness programs and trainings and allowing people to see the importance of that ecosystem, one, and then bring them to their space to see how they can, just enjoy it. So there's a botanical garden that we funded that is now actually actively being managed. The trees are growing. These are indigenous trees that have economic, medicinal, and other values. And to me, this is important because when you think of funding young people, many people want you to make this usual, philanthropic. You fit these, requirements. But I do feel in the 21st century we need to change how we are doing grant making, how we are approaching philanthropy. Let us allow young people access to micro grants, access to unrestricted funding, and not just one off. At times, we need to think about the multi-year cycles to fund them, and seeing young people and communities more like partners, not people that are coming to us for money. No, they are, yes, asking for the monies, but they're asking for the monies to contribute and continue the works they're doing on the ground.
Yeah.
And if we can come from that point of view, I believe we can make a better case for the communities doing the work, and therefore being able to first, take climate action, limit the, global greenhouse gas emissions, and empower the communities to do much more without so much dependence on global philanthropy.
And I think something important that you've touched on is the fact that they're already doing something. It's not that you met them waiting. They're already doing something about it. And I like the conversation on really thinking about micro grants, because sometimes when you go to these platforms asking for money, people think you need thousands of dollars and millions for you to effect change. But then the moment you start working with grassroots communities, you realize they do so much with very little resources. This is not to mean they should be given small resources, but taking a chance on them can really allow them to scale up the kind of solutions that they're already implementing. So I know Inuka really did quite a bit in Ondiri, and I got to witness that. And so congratulations on that work. And you also talked about something on sustainability of the projects that ideally we have funded. And I think now that I've also worked a bit on small grants and grant making, I think the biggest challenge for us is really realizing that even in this time and age, a lot is changing in terms of the climate finance mechanisms that exist now, globally and locally, if I can call it that. And it feels like we're coming to a place where someone was saying we have to make a business case for climate. And I know the African continent and African youth are quite entrepreneurial anyway, because most people implement projects because they want something in return, they want to earn a living, etc. So I guess my question is, what do you think the future is going to look like in terms of climate finance? And I ask because I know you've been on the side of raising funds for your own projects and then transitioning to where you're now also giving grants. So just how do you feel this conversation is going to go?
Thank you. And maybe I trace back to my previous comments and how you followed up from my story about Inuka. I'll just say that when it comes to community work, I'll always tell people that communities are not expensive, but do not mistake that to mean that they're cheap, All communities and youth needed was just the small critical amounts to just unlock the next frontier on where they want to go with development and their conservation work, because like you said, it's not like that you're getting them from nowhere. These people are doing so much. These people are the people who have been there, from millennials back, right? So they understand the ecosystem, they understand the issues that they're facing. They also know who from the community is contributing to the destruction of the environment, right? But those are the same people who understand the resilience and the processes which we can use to actually restore and get back to that serene nature that used to exist. So I think for philanthropists and people in the donor world know that communities are not expensive. It does not make them cheap. So unlock your potential, unlock your financing, and support them from where they are. But coming to your point, I feel the future looks more hopeful from where I say I'm the stubborn optimist anyway. And whether people like it or not, Africa is the future. Of course, we are the global youthful continent, and that means we have this economic dividend, we have this demographic dividend. The young people in Africa are a force to reckon with. So any investor, any funder, any finance holder who wants to really think about the wise investment into the future, they have to think about Africa. And I see that you're thinking about the projects, coming up. Think of groups like Gaia, for instance, think about the Great Green Wall of Africa, it will highly depend on young people. So if there's no financing being put for these programs, that will be a problem. It means that we may not go to, contribute much to achieve the climate commitments of the world. We've heard about the adaptation goals, the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. There's so much, even at the Africa Climate Summits, there's a lot of conversations about how we need to check the finance architecture, in a way that centers Africa, in a way that prioritizes our African youth. So I do see a very hopeful future where Africa is leading and more monies are coming to Africa. But there's a caveat to that. We can only get so much money as we are prepared. So if we are not prepared to receive the monies and to be accountable, it becomes an issue of maladaptation and missed priorities, So I do hope, even as we're talking about the hope for monies to come to Africa, we also need to prepare our systems and ensure we have transparency, we have virtues and ethics that can guide how we are using this money in a wise way and thinking beyond self, we know corruption has been an issue, so I cannot talk about that without bringing that point. So climate finance will work if we remove corruption and a lot of these graft cases from the case. If there's the green climate bonds, money coming from the GCF or GEF, it needs to really come in a transparent way, and our own leaders, our own systems, our own departments need to also know they have accountability to make sure the money goes to the very communities who need the most.
Yeah. The reason why I am laughing and smiling is because we've been in the movement for a while, 2015 up until now. And I think climate only became popular a couple of years ago. And that's because people said there's money in climate. And now everyone is running to get money in climate. But you see, what I always say is you cannot separate development, climate, and energy. That is literally how I see the world and how I see Africa, for example. And now I guess we are in a season, because even at the Africa Climate Summit, one of the biggest conversation was green industrialization for Africa. And who is going to be the people that execute it? It's the African young population. So they need to reskill them. They need to prepare them to receive this new shift towards green industrialization, whether it's on issues of renewable energy access, whether it's issues of completely transforming what we knew as work. It is the young population of Africa that is going to be at the center of it. And now, thinking about green industrialization, I remember at the Africa Climate Summit, there are actually banks that came together to commit to mobilize money internally in Africa. So we are no longer, of course, we still have to talk about climate from a perspective of the common but differentiated, what is it called? Responsibilities, because then the aspect of climate justice still has to stand, but we also need to figure out how we can also fundraise internally for our own needs, because, for example, you were at COP29 in Baku. There's a Baku to Belém roadmap where we are trying to raise 1.3 trillion US dollars for climate finance, but only 300 billion was committed. So it's like it will be a continuous cycle of commitments that are never met, because even the 100 billion USD commitment that now before the NCQG also did not meet that particular commitment. So
and you see the big boys and big girls withdrawing whenever they feel it's convenient for them.
Yeah, and it's crazy how one big country, pulls back on their climate commitment, and it has a ripple effect on so many crucial programs. And we've witnessed that, whether it's in Africa or in Kenya, we've seen what is happening. So we really need to look internally. And for the first time, Africa needs to wake up, honestly. We have the resources. Everyone is taking from us. So at what point are we going to actually sit down and say, hey, we need to look internally, because some of these other continents can't survive without us because of the resources that we have. And we are always getting the short hand of the stick because we don't position ourselves well. Yeah.
No, I mean, I feel I hear you, and we are seeing it a lot. Even the East is now coming to Africa for critical, minerals, and it can. I feel we are experiencing what is now neo-colonialism.
Yes.
It's very soft power, and of course, we'll give you these grants, but then in return, just allow our people to come and explore some things here and there. But then we are sleeping, like you're saying. We need to wake up, and it worries me when we hear about how literally people in global north are fighting over Africa on who to control what critical mineral. We've just heard about the case between America and China.
That's insane.
Fighting
We're
on who
literally
wants
here.
who wants to come to Taita Taveta for these critical minerals for powering the green future. And they are doing it without respecting that Kenya is a country, independent, a sovereign state that has its own rules and set of policies. And we are sidelined, and I feel it also goes a long way to show how African leadership is also being perceived globally. It's the reason I said if we are to actually even have serious leadership in climate financing and the future that we're looking at, we need to bring ourselves to a meeting, what we say in Swahili, tujitaka mkutano. And in this meeting, we need to have this honest, genuine conversation, right? We need to literally rethink our policies, rethink our foreign relations policies, think our development and investment policies, think about how Africa can leverage on these resources, and then also think, why is it that we always have to mine things, export them as raw materials, only to come and buy them at almost 3-10 times more expensive, the worth of the initial cost at the raw point of export. So we need to think about green industrialization. Who is it happening for? Why can't we set these industries here, right? And why is it that every time there's a new term, it's always coming for Africans to be on the receiving end, and the money gets found, never finds its way to Africa. And if it does, it comes through the pockets of a few people.
Exactly.
So I think those are important conversations to have, but honestly going to say, yes, I agree with you, we need to wake up as Africa. There's a lot happening already. I think we need to appreciate ourselves on that, but we still have a lot more to go. Governance systems, raising resources from within as well, and creating those trust-based systems, systems free of corruption and graft that can allow transparency
and accountability.
And accountability, yes.
Yes. Great. So as we wrap up, I obviously can't wrap up without talking about COP30 in Brazil, one of the most exclusive COPs I have ever witnessed in my life, because those expenses are crazy. And, I thought being Global South, we're supposed to, not all of us, but at least have an opportunity to see indigenous communities rising up to the occasion and seeing what they're doing in terms of climate solutions. But of course, so many of us, or so many crucial voices, not even me, but crucial voices will not be present at COP because of how expensive it is, and also limitations on access and accreditation. And you'd think we are supposed to be moving forward, but it feels like we're taking a few steps back. Anyways, they have their reasons for that. So what would you want to see out of this particular COP, knowing that we're building on conversations of the new quantified goal for, is it NCQG? New collective quantified goal on climate finance and adaptation. So what are you expecting to see out of COP30?
First, I'll be the devil's advocate. In this case, you're my devil. And
I'm
say
not a
that
devil, but
in this case, you are. And I'll just say that, honestly, it's been very unfair how the climate conferences have been happening. And it almost gives the vibe that, we're in a climate kind of holiday. It's like you're on a cruise ship, and you have to just every other year plan to waste what money to go to a particular country, to just give speeches upon speeches, make
people
commitments.
Preaching to the choir that is already, I'm already sold to the idea.
I know. And then it's like the same circles, year in, year out. And it's more like what you said, we are making 2 steps forward, but almost 10 back, Because tell me how that is of climate negotiations, we cannot even agree on a single term. We cannot agree on what's needed. We cannot agree on the scale of financing needed to be given or to go towards global south, right? We're even having conversation about carbon market that I hate so much to discuss, but we are seeing people are using that route as a way for them to, put money into climate finance because they know they have a business case. But tell me why, or how fair is it where you continue to, pollute in global north and give us some peanuts to clean your mess while you still continue to pollute, So I do feel like the way the climate conversation has been held around up and around the climate conference has been a problem. But we need to change things. Two, on climate financing, I feel it's enough that we've been committing and pledging, There comes a time where humanity has to bring itself to an order and literally know when to compromise, how to compromise. And for Global North, the compromise means you need to release the climate funds. You have the finances, you have the moral obligation because you've also historically polluted,
Yes.
I don't feel that we need to come, it's not a favor we are asking, it's a right that global south countries deserve. It's a right that indigenous communities who control a lot of these territories deserve. So we need the climate finance now and here. COP30 has to be a defining pivotal moment, and we need to really see how this becomes a people's COP. How do we make it more accessible? How do we also moving forward, because the damage is done right now, it's so expensive, it's very exclusionary, but then moving forward, how can we make COP31 better? And it's worse because also know COP31 will be in Australia, another very far off place, more expensive maybe. But I feel moving forward, we need to rethink how are we hosting these climate conferences, to what extent are they beneficial in the climate movement, and then how can we actually rethink the will, because they say stupidity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, and I feel that is the same vicious cycle we've been having for the last 30 years. So yes, it's 10 years of Paris Agreement. People are going to Belém, but I hope that there'll be those honest conversations, and I do hope for the few young people and indigenous representatives who are going to COP, please speak truth to power. And I hope even when they deny you access, you bulldoze your way into these rooms, make your case heard. And I do hope at least we can make some progress, and we can make this COP count for communities and for young people, especially across the global south.
Thank you so much, Kaluki. Not to take away anything you have said, but I feel like I must say this.
Please.
So I became very hopeless of COPs after COP28 in Dubai, because there was, I think when we went for COP28 and just seeing Dubai in itself, I think I was disgusted, and not in a good or a bad way. I can't explain it, but it was just the lights, the extravagance that we witnessed from it, and knowing that all this is because of fossil fuels. And I'm a realist. I understand nations have to develop, people have to make better lives for their populations, but like you, I share in your sentiments of we can't continue to do the same thing expecting different results. And I remember questioning whether this particular process is actually giving us what we need. Do we need to rethink the entire system? Because 30 years ago, I was not born. There were people sitting, negotiating on climate, and we are here doing the same thing. So is it that we need to rethink the entire system? And I'm not taking away the importance of having the UNFCCC and the negotiations, because then it brings all of us together to have conversations about climate issues and who is responsible for what should be done. That platform is important, but we really need something else.
We need, and I'm sorry, maybe you're helping me get more points, but I'll say this. For instance, I'll give two comparative analyses. The first one, tell me how it makes sense that when America goes to these climate negotiations, it goes as America. America has several states. When Africa goes, we go as our own individual countries. So even from that point, it's not a fair playing ground. I would imagine if Africa was to go to these climate conferences, we go as a bloc, an Africa Union, right? But for the most part, the divide and rule conquer takes the center stage, right?
And it's by the same perpetrators of colonialism, because
Exactly.
there's so many, even with the Paris Agreement, for us to not even get the recognition for the common but differentiated responsibilities in the text is because there was an interception by a colonial power to a certain country that was supposed to sign into that. And this thing happens all the time.
And they say, yeah, you can't, bite the hand that feeds you, which is very unfair. I feel we need to just, let's think this policy. Let's think how the process works. Let's think about the power. Like, for instance, when the Security Council, UN, again, I'll go, how is Africa not having a seat? We are such a big region with so many countries with such a serious population. So really, if we have to think about this, we need to see Africa not as a beggar or a victim, seeing Africa as an equal partner. But it's also not about us trying to beg for it. I feel Africa needs to have its own demand. We need to actually create our own self-actualization moment and get that strategy. We've seen China. That's how China developed. Right now, they're forced to reckon with in the world, right? And so Africa needs to identify itself in that global dynamic and seeing how this whole thing makes sense. Maybe it's not a must that we go to this conference. So imagine if all over 50 African countries decided to just, stop going to the climate conferences. It will have a serious impact. And maybe at that point, it's when the world will wake up and see that actually for us to have an equitable, fair conference outcomes, we need to redefine the rules and get global South countries the respect and the justifiable seat that they need on the table. Anyway, at the end of the day, I'm still the stubborn optimist, and I do believe that for the few who will go to represent us, Abigail, they will still have maybe something hopeful to represent and some good outcomes out of the same. And more so, like you said, for the youth and indigenous communities, these are people who are doing so much in their communities. And it feels so wrong when the conferences are made in so expensive ways that you cannot have, a sense of belonging. And even when people go there, you're thinking how much money you spend, so you don't have time to focus on the actual conference. You're focusing on how much money you've wasted that could have gone to your community.
Yeah.
So I do hope even for the few that are going there, they still make something out of it, and trusting that moving forward we can have better approaches at these conferences. And more so, let us, I don't want to say show the money, because the money is there. It's not a question of being shown the money. Bring the money, give the money out, deliver the money to the people.
Yeah.
There's
a lot to say. Obviously, we can do this on another podcast, but thank you so much for making time to speak to us today. It was a lovely conversation. I feel stirred to want to talk about other things, but let's end it there today.
Thank you, Abigail, for hosting.
Well, thank you so much for staying tuned on the Hali Hewa podcast. This was a conversation with me and Kaluki Mutuku, and I hope you will be here with us on the next one. Subscribe, share, like, suggest topics you'd like us to discuss. See you on the next one.